Well, greetings, everyone, and welcome to a very special online event today. It's called Be, Live, and Share the Spirit of Aloha, Ancient Hawaiian Wisdom for Spiritual Alignment and Reconnecting with Your Soul's True Rhythm. My name is Stephen Dynam, the founder and president of the Shift Network, and I've been to Hawaii many times. And while it's beautiful and an ecosystem, I think what's even more beautiful is the ancient culture and practices of the Hawaiian Islands and the traditional peoples and the people who still carry that forward. And we have a unique opportunity to learn from one of the teachers of this cultural inheritance. His name is Kumu Ramsay Taum. He's a cultural wisdom keeper and kumu of indigenous Hawaiian healing arts, and comes from highly recommended from other shift faculty. And we're super excited to have this opportunity to dive deep into the spirit of aloha and how we can use that to bless our lives and to bless others as well. So Kumu Ramsay, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, and with a very deep and resounding aloha. Thank you for having me and for being.
Beautiful. Well, I want to say right up front, we're going to have this time, and there's going to be a real spirit of aloha in this hour. And if you want to go further, Kumu Ramsay has agreed to teach a brand new program for Shift called the Sacred Path of Aloha that we'll share about more towards the end of the hour. So more to come if you wish. So, Kumu Ramsay, I would love for you to begin our time together with a little bit about your journey into your wisdom lineage and what sort of your training and initiation and particularly the spirit of aloha and how that really is kind of like a guiding principle that pervades the whole philosophy.
No, thank you, Stephen. If I may, though, also bring us in with the traditions of Hawaii, because as
Cool.
we're starting in a nice place, and one of the concepts we have in Hawaii is to start right to end right. One of those things is to acknowledge where we are, all those that may have been and may are on their way. And we would call this a pule ole or an invocation. So I would just ask everyone just to take a moment and allow me to share this from my kupuna and my elders to you and your own. And it goes something like this. E ho'olukuno no ke kino ame ka ohane. E mā lama pono, ka manao, ke ola, ke kino. I kamanawa apau loa. Aloha, aloha, aloha. E mahalo. Thank you. You know,
Thank
in those words, Stephen, it talks about unifying our minds, our body, and our spirit,
you.
and in a unification of oneness. But it also underlines and calls upon the idea that we're all connected, you and I, and all things around us, especially when we become united that way. And this learning, this teaching, this sharing comes from many elders over the years. As I respond to your question about my origins, if you would, and how I got to be in or where I am as a result of these things. So I wanted to just start there and ask everyone to recognize that at some point we're all connected, and what we do to ourselves, we do to others, and them to us. So perhaps living with aloha, the reciprocity agreement of giving and receiving. And essentially, that's kind of what's happened with me. I was fortunate to be raised in a family and a culture that honored, respected, and revered our elders, as well as the things around us, but the relationship with them. And so I found myself not just being in the presence, but being in the service of many of these elders who I would refer to as kupuna. In the Hawaiian language, kupuna refers to source. Puna is a source, like a spring, while the reference to ku is the idea of the human condition or man. So we are the product, we come from the springs of man or humans, which are our elders. So consequently, it's important to care for your origins and care
Mm.
for elders. So out of that cultural practice, I found myself in service to many elders. And if I stopped at 10, but there may be as many as 15 that I can recall special moments and time with, they were instrumental in helping me to learn who I was, and as well as how to reciprocate and giving back into the world and sharing with me. And I kind of joke about it, but it's like they saw an empty coconut that needed to be filled. And I was long enough around for them to do that. And so my life at this point has been trying to empty that coconut so that it can continue to be filled. But that was a portion of my life following an education experience, a work experience, both here in the islands of Hawaii as well as on the continent. And we in the islands refer to the continent as the continent and not the mainland because Hawaii is our mainland. This is where we are. And so I was very fortunate to attend universities in California, in Washington, D.C., and then ultimately work in Washington, D.C. And so being able to stand in multiple worlds and understanding the value and importance of what that looks like, how to be in those spaces. And these elders training and sharing really has helped me to do that for myself, as well as numerous clients, both in community, business, corporation, and in an international level as well. So that's kind of a
Yeah, it's
high
beautiful,
entry.
beautiful. So I want to circle back. So in your opening invocation, you said aloha three times in reference to sort of your integrating body, mind, and spirit. So maybe give us a little deeper picture, since I think most people have aloha as more just think of it as a greeting rather
Yeah.
than it's a kind of metaphysical understanding.
There's a tendency for us as a people, wherever we are, to look for singularities and compress things. And in some cases, as in the case of Aloha, it's ended up being a bumper sticker, but
Mhm.
it's so much bigger than that. It does fit as a greeting when I aloha and greet someone, but there's a commitment underneath that greeting because aloha is a spiritual principle. It's a way of being.
Hmm.
It's a way of living. It's an interactive, creative thing, and sometimes it's contextual because it's a result of being present. It's a result of exchanging, and like I said, reciprocity, giving and receiving. And so when we break the word down into the spiritual components, because the Hawaiian language is a spiritual language that draws upon the elementals or the elements of spirit, of the elements around us: air, water, land, the earth itself, you and I, the spirit of the human condition. And when you look at the word aloha, it's really drawing upon the creative energy that is found in the sun, the la, as we say in Hawaii,
Hmm.
and being connected to it face to face as you and I are now. But when we're present with one another, uh, you oftentimes find Polynesians when we greet one another, nose to nose, head to head. And you may see this in films and movies, but it's a it's a matter of respect. It's a matter of peace. It's understanding that if I can get that close to you, nose to nose, there's a great deal of respect there, as well as safety.
Hmm.
And so in this aloha, that first word, a root word of aloha, is alo. And that is to be face to face, to confront, to be right there. In our case, nose to nose. That alo, to be in the presence of, to acknowledge that which is in front of you. But what else? The second part, another large root word in the aloha, is the concept of ha, the life-giving breath, the spiritual breath, the thing that you come into the world with, and when we leave, we give it back. And in between the first breath and the last breath, we don't own it. But we acknowledge that that spiritual breath, that life comes from something much bigger than us. And we call it divinity. Some would call it God, the creative energies, the forces, etc. Creator. And if that's the case, then when you say aloha, you're saying that I am now in the presence. I am facing, I'm acknowledging and revering this reverence to be in the presence of the divine spirit that is in you as much as it is in me.
Hmm.
And so aloha is a commitment, really. It says that while we're together, whether it's 3 minutes, 3 hours, or 3 days, or even 3 centuries, the idea is that you can be assured that I will not damage the air between you and I. Because when I damage that air, your air, I damage my air. When I don't care for my safe, my space, and my place, I am inviting you into perhaps some danger. So it's out of respect, a deep commitment that we say aloha, which is very different than just saying hi.
Yes.
If you
It's
can't
like
if
I
you
see
can't
the
make that
divinity in
commitment,
you, and I pledge to honor that in how we engage. I mean, what an extraordinary way to meet another soul.
yeah, I mean, you can do a handshake, you can do a wave, and you can just say hi because there's really no commitment to the follow through after that. If anything, the handshake, it just shows you I don't have a weapon. Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's where some of the origins of those handshake come. The wave is also the same idea. See, open hand, nothing worried, nothing up my sleeves, you don't have to worry about. But when you're nose to nose, forehead to forehead, and exchanging breath, especially after our experience with COVID, uh, we have to understand that there's a deep level of respect there
Mm-hmm.
and reverence. And in a world where we tend to refer to things, there's references. This is an act and a practice that is ancestral, that is rooted in reverence. And so what it says that I'm respecting you as another being, a spirit being that is present in this physical form, so that we can begin to interact. And it's not enough that our noses and foreheads may touch, but it's action exchange of spirit, of breath. And that's particularly important when it comes to a student and a teacher, an elder and a follower, or someone of the family, because there is an exchange going on in that.
Mm.
So, as you can see, that's more than just hello or goodbye.
Yeah, that's an amazingly multi-leveled understanding. I want to go back with this notion of reciprocity when you're touching
Sure.
forehead and nose, and that you're sort of entering into the field and that sort of
Correct.
respect. And yeah, we've done a lot of programs with some folks from Peru, and Aini, the sort of sacred reciprocity is really central. So you would kind of reference that. So maybe talk a little bit about how does reciprocity, manifest once you've established this aloha commitment really to another soul.
Yeah. So, I'll use the example of a student and his or her teacher, right? In the Hawaiian language, the concept of a student, the name that we use is haumana. And you can break that down, which is the spiritual principle of our language, into various root energies, root spirits, and root words. So haumana is and can be seen as haumana or haumana, however you want to break that down. But in that breakdown, we're talking about breath, spirit, that life energy. So a teacher's life energy is expressed through their words, through the exhale when they meet their student. So the u is a reference to the spirit of the human condition, that teacher's spirit. And the mana is their skill set, the physical ability to carry out, take the wisdom that is brought in with spirit. So at one point in time, not so much today, but we are reviving that and restoring the reverence for this practice, is that a student meeting and greeting his or her, we say kumu, which is the reference that my students defer to me and my teachers have actually extend to me, is that when they come together, the teacher might exhale nose to nose, but as they exhale their spirit, the student would then inhale that spirit. And in that, they receive the spiritual essence, the being, as well as the mana, the skill set of that teacher. Now, when that teacher makes his or her transition and moves to the next classroom, oftentimes you'll find that that singular haumana, not many, just one, would ultimately embody the very teacher. So if you knew the teacher in the physical space prior to their transition, you would now see, hear, feel, and experience that teacher in this new student. That student now becomes the teacher. And I'm not sure if you've ever experienced that, but to be someone's protege, right? Where when you're with that person, I'm now sitting with Stephen, but I hear, feel, and see all of Stephen's ancestors coming through them in their expressions, in their facial movements, their hand movements, and just in their presence and their being.
Mm.
So that reciprocity agreement is the teacher has now shared all of this as they move to the next space. And the student then carries on the responsibility of the sharing. And the reciprocity is to give back, but to give forward to everyone that comes and meets them. So they become the continuation
Hmm.
of that teacher, and the practices, um, the principles, and the values that teacher has embodied and now shared with this
Hmm.
particular student. Now, that's in a particular case of one student to a teacher. But reciprocity of aloha just says, as I share with you, you share with me. And
Hmm.
I'm going to make sure that that is unbroken, which means there should never be anybody hungry or without a home or without love or family. Because if I extend that to you, at some point that comes back to me. And it is that giving and that receiving that we find wholeness. So aloha is really about leaving people whole, not in one.
I love that these are beautiful explanations. And so I love this kind of image of like this is like a living lineage of breath passed down
Yeah.
through generations of teachers and students, and then you're just carrying that breath into the next generation. It's really
Well, if
beautiful.
we think about it, Stephen, the trees around us have been breathing the air that great teachers like Jesus and Buddha and everyone, because we call it recycling, but I think that's regenerative. Whatever air they breathed and breathed out, it went out. What we breathed out goes into that tree. The tree goes into the animal, and it comes back to us. All of this. So we are all connected in that way. So it gives some meaning to my entry invocation.
Hmm.
We're all connected by breath. And we may have experienced a negative connotation of that with COVID because that's what connected us all. It was air, not so much ground. So common ground may be more appropriately stated as common air. Uh,
Common air. I love
Common
that.
air. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah, it's so beautiful. Well, I want to, so that's sort of in a way, the higher principles. I want to ask a little bit about some of the healing arts when we get out of alignment with that sort of the spirit of sacred reciprocity or traumas and things that need to be cleared. Love for you to just share a little bit about the philosophy, how to work with things that are sort of, held traumas, ancestral things that are just sort of, that we can get stuck with unless we learn how to work with them.
Yeah. I mean, it starts out with a basic understanding and belief that one, first, we're all connected.
Hmm.
Two, that time isn't the artificial time that we look at on my watch or the wall, but there is a natural and spiritual time where this energy called spirit is operating in a continuum, which means as a part of that continuum, standing in a stream, if you would, my ancestors, they're standing upstream and my descendants standing downstream. We're all connected by that stream. And when we're in that stream, whatever they throw in that stream will now come to me. What I leave in the stream will go to my descendants. So consequently, good, bad, or indifferent, whatever their practices may be, we now become the beneficiaries of that. And many of us have received some of the things that may not have been so good, but these are the lessons that we're learning from, which we now may define as problems or challenges, and others traumas because they're painful. And in this case, we're in that stream. When we have a practice, and this practice of Ho'oponopono, which many people have now hearing about, is the ability to be able to clean that up. So before I release the water to my descendants, that I'm going to do something to clean up that water with gratitude because I want to thank my ancestors. I am who I am because of them. I own all of that. I can't disown it because that is who I am. I am part of all of that. So even the traumas. So I'd like to say that we learn from our mentors as well as our tormentors.
That's a nice phrase.
Right. And so you learn what you don't want to do as well as what you want to do. And I suggest that some of these traumas that we have defined as traumas are actually lessons uh, that were placed in the stream for us. And if
Uh,
we can see it with a sense of gratitude, uh, that I'm not going to pass this on. So that's the other part. It's just not being grateful for the fact that I now have the opportunity to grow, to expand, and learn more. But I also have the opportunity to cut that and break that tie so that my descendants and those that follow me don't necessarily have to go through all of that pain and the trauma because we've now taken care of it.
mm,
And that allows them to be much more present in their being and their learning, their sharing, etc. So as an individual, this process helps me to be more present, to be more active, to be more responsive and less reactive. in one way or another.
Hmm.
So the practice of Ho'oponopono being one of those spiritual practices of addressing those traumas in the present so that we can begin to shift the future.
Yeah. I love the combination of the deep gratitude that Ho'oponopono provides, and then you're also putting a line in the sand and severing, and I think it's like ha mahiki or something. I've heard
Yeah,
somebody, it's like
it's
where you're,
Mahiki. Yeah, the
yeah,
Mahiki.
you're kind of severing that, but in a space of loving gratitude too, which is quite a beautiful combination. Usually we're sort of, there's some resistance when we're trying to
That's
cut
right.
off
That's right. That's right.
a, a legacy of some kind. I love that. Do you want to share anything more about? I mean, we're not going to do the practice of Ho'opono today. We're going to
Oh,
do
no.
more, but a little bit more about that, since a lot of people hear about Ho'oponopono from at least a surface level. Maybe a little. You've been beautiful at divulging the deeper layers too.
Yeah, this it's ceremony. So much as is ceremony these days, whether it is or not. But we've turned it into ceremony. Ho'oponopono is a practice in ceremony of reuniting with oneself, and more importantly, in the process of doing that with source, where we come from, the creative energy that then connects us to all things. But in order to do that, this is about centering, becoming much more in alignment. So there are different words for it, but I'd say Ho'oponopono is a way of restoring or achieving alignment. And the higher level of alignment inside that word Ho'oponopono, the condition that we're trying to achieve and maintain moment to moment, is called pono. So when one is pono, your internal family, which we'll be talking about, is in alignment. Your mind, your body, your spirit, your physical, spiritual, and conscious minds. And so when that becomes aligned, you can say you're pono. And then when you're in alignment, you're now plugged in to source, the source of healing, prosperity, peace, all of those things that we would look for in the process of forgiveness, the process of letting go, the process of curative and healing practices, because you're now collecting back to the primary creator of that. And I don't think creator wants has or created pain or discomfort. That's what we experience as we realign ourselves to that. So when you're pono, you're not just aligned with yourself, but you're also aligned with divinity, if you would. And if that's the case, then you become aligned with everything around you, right? The forest, the ocean, the mountains, wherever you find yourself, as well as all of those beings that are there, human and otherwise. And so this is what you'd refer to then as the one mind, ekahi, the singular mind. And when you are in that state, that is when health is restored. And so the process of ho'oponopono is the way of restoring or bringing in the condition of pono. So when you find yourself in dis-ease, disorder, disconnected, and discontentment, that's just a sign that there's a misalignment.
Mm.
Somewhere mentally you're out of a line, somewhere physically you're out of a line. But when you are in alignment and you are full, complete, uh, it's a different way of saying mindfulness, right?
Mm.
I am now full. I'm complete, as we say in Hawaiian, piha. And so that mindfulness, I am now present. And I can be much more centered in self and a little less self-centered. But it's when I am out of one of those minds, when I'm not in a conscious, I'm not physical, healthy, then you can say you're mindless. You're no
Mm.
longer mindful. And at that point, you might even say you're out of your mind. And so, right? So when we're out of our mind, the symptoms of that could be numerous ones. I have a headache. I'm angry. I'm fearful because I'm no longer in my one mind, in my peace, in my place, and I'm no longer in unison. I'm no longer in harmony with those things around us.
Ah.
So that's a major healing and not just the fixing. And I think that's important that many people may see Ho'oponopono as a way of fixing a bad condition.
Uh-huh.
Well, Stephen, I'm not sure I want a better bad situation, right? So this isn't about making bad better. It's about really focusing on a preferred condition where health, prosperity, peace, and all the things that we aspire to are there because we remove the the underlying causes, the ingredients. And in this case, the ingredients happens to be memory and the things that came downstream from our ancestors before us.
Uh-huh.
So,
It was a beautiful explanation. And we said in describing today, we would talk a little bit about the victim mentality. And so what I can infer from what you're saying is that the victim mentality is taking us out of the one mind into sort of a form of resistance. Maybe share
yes.
a little bit more about how, like, any way that we're seeing ourselves as victimized by what we've inherited or experienced is actually puts us out of that right pono.
Sure. I mean, I think it's recognizing what we refer to as ancestral trauma,
Mhm.
something that happened back there as the continuation of that. I like to suggest that as the beneficiaries of all of that, that ancestral trauma is not there. It's here with us right now as I'm experiencing it. So many people have a difficulty thinking that I have to live with this because I can't change that. That's back there. But when you shift this consciousness to understanding that that ancestral trauma is in you, you are your ancestors. I am my ancestors as you are yours. And if that's the case, I have the ability now to remove and work on those things through this spiritual practice. Maybe not a physical one, but the spiritual practice that begins to shift us internally. Um, so it's acknowledging that some of the beliefs that we have or the pains that we're carrying, the hurtful memories, they may not even be our own. Some of us are carrying traumas that we've seen other experiencing and we've adopted them as our own and we're carrying that, but it's really not ours. So how do we let that go? The process of Ho'oponopono is one way of doing that, of being able to let go of those things. Um, for instance, my a great grandmother, hypothetically, many generations ago, decided she wanted to help her descendants by sharing with them a beautiful parka. She lived in a very cold land. Well, all these generations later, this parka has been passed on one to another. And I finally received that parka, and I'm sitting in a very hot climate called Hawaii. And I'm walking around with this parka out of respect for my grandmother, sweating and even perhaps being a little angry at her for giving me this parka, right? And translating all of my problems to this sweaty parka that has now been passed on to me. Well, at some point in time in this process, we have the a capacity to say, Grandma, thank you for thinking of me. And thank you for passing on this gift that was intended to help me. But I've shifted. My life is in a different place now. And so, what I like to be able to do is pass this on to someone who can use this and adopt those things such as a t-shirt that can allow me to be more present in this space in this time and do so without the guilt but with the reverence and honoring of my grandmother's gift and saying thank you for thinking of me, but it's now time that I take a step forward and replace this wonderful gift with one that is more appropriate.
Hmm.
That is the same way of saying the pain that I'm experiencing can be replaced with the joy of something else, simply by me making that choice and recognizing that I don't need to use the criteria of the past to make decisions of the future, that I can honor the gifts, good, bad, or indifferent,
Hmm.
as well as pass them off and begin to develop new ones. And so that's essentially what Ho'oponopono is doing for us. Because unlike my story, I may not be aware of I'm wearing a parka. I have a spiritual parka that I've been carrying around from generation to generation. All I remember is that I have an obligation to honor whatever that is. And many of us are honoring things that perhaps at the time was honorable, but we've now reached a time when we have to move to a new way of being. Uh, and that becomes more centered. So I hope that helps to kind of.
Yeah, it's very beautiful, great metaphor, and really helps us see like how to be in right relationship with what we've inherited and transform into new circumstances.
Yeah.
So
There's
so
there's one
I,
other thing I like to suggest is that there's a tendency for us to look outside of ourselves. And that's what this is about. I'd like to say simply it's an inside job.
Mhm.
Not and beginning to recognize that we are not the victims of externalities as much as us many want to. So I just wanted to address that thought of the victim mentality that you mentioned, is that the tendency for us to look outside, blame it, them, whatever is outside of us for what's going on inside of us. And I think in our conversation, we'll be able to realign that and begin to let go of that belief system and start working where it really is happening inside.
That makes total sense. I know you were wanted to lead us in a ha practice that would really
Yes.
help us to anchor some of the deeper philosophy you've been sharing in our own bodies. So I'd love to invite you to do that now.
Yeah. So again, Ha, as I mentioned earlier, is a life-giving breath that energizes us. And in each breath, when we focus on it, call upon it, what we're asking for is mana. Mana, as in the life-giving force. Some may have heard the stories of those walking through the desert and being fed by manna or manna. It's a very common concept. But manna is life force energy that allows my eyes to blink, my hair to grow, my internal systems to continue being, but it also allows me to commune with the world around me. And so the ha breathing process is part of the Ho'oponopono process, but it's one that you can use daily to recharge your physical being and to reconnect to your spiritual being. This is the unification of mind and body. And so the ha breathing process, when we're doing it in the process of Ho'oponopono, are 7 rounds. What I'd like to do here is share at least one round with you and how to practice that. And so essentially, it's the number 7. It's a magical number, but there are 4 parts to this one round of ha breathing. The first part is to inhale slowly with your nose and to focus on life giving energy, mana, being served and shared with you through that inner breath. And as you breathe, you want to count to a number of 7. Now, each of us has our own blueprint, our own makeup. So I would invite everyone to just count according to your comfort, to your beingness. It might be quick, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or maybe 1, 2, 3, whatever that is. Um, I'd be cautious. We have some deep sea divers here who can hold their breath a long time. So we're going to keep moving through the process here, and you'll still benefit. So if you count for 7 counts as you inhale, then you hold that breath for 7 counts. And then you exhale, release that breath for 7 counts. And then you inhale once again for 7 counts. Let's say inhale, outhale, inhale, outhale. Right. So those 4 times. And we'll consider that one round for today. Okay. So if you just find yourself comfortable, if you aren't already doing it, just slowly inhale for 7 counts. Hold that breath for 7 counts. Exhale for 7 counts. And inhale for 7 counts. Wonderful. Again, this breathing process can be used at any time of day when you're feeling out of sort and you just want to recharge that battery. Inhale for 7, hold for 7, exhale for 7, and hold for 7. Yeah. I have to repeat that again. Inhale for 7, hold for 7, exhale for 7, and hold for 7. I may have said inhale, but hold. So you want to complete that cycle. Allow all of the mana, this life energy, to enter that part of your being that needs that energy. Again, focusing on, calling in, and receiving the divine energy of mana through the delivery process of ha, of breathing and breath. If you're feeling a discomfort or pain anywhere in your body, You can ask that that mana, that ha breath, be taken to that place. If it's in your foot, your knee, your back, your arm, direct that mana just like you're sending mail to an address and bring back balance, restore balance and healing to that place of discomfort or disconnect. Okay. Inhale for 7, hold for 7, exhale for 7, and hold for 7. So that's essentially one round, but you can see how powerful that can be. Very good. Oh my goodness, you look so peaceful, Stephen.
Dropping in here into the spirit of this.
Yeah. And what's essential about this, or what's existential, right? It allows us to be, is that I can do this without doing harm to anyone else.
Mm,
And more importantly, to recognize that as I breathe out all that is good and not just what is bad, that I can begin to shift the atmosphere around me, because ha is another word for atmosphere,
mm,
space between you and I.
mm-hmm.
And as you recall, or some of us have heard, that oftentimes when we have damaged that space, we will say, let's clear the air between us. Right.
That's good. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think ha is atmosphere. It is the space between us, as well as the space in us. And it is actually how we connect to that external space with each breath,
Mm-hmm.
bringing it out and bringing it in and exchanging it. So that itself, ha, is in demonstration of reciprocity.
That's beautiful.
In fact, I would
You,
ask people is you can't take a breath. You have to give it back.
yeah, that's really it's great the spirit there. Do you pair that with Ho'oponopono as well? So there's sort of like this is part of the way that you're alchemizing or transmuting things.
Absolutely. So in the process, um, let's just like taking an excursion to climb a tall mountain or drive up for that matter. Before you start your journey, you fill up your tank. And once you get there, you've pretty much used most of your reserves. And as you come back down, you need to fill up again. And so the whole point of process is that as you start to begin to do what we call cleansing,
Hmm.
you're going to need this energy in order to do that. Mana. Right?
You build your mana, do some cleansing, go back, do some more build up
That's
of
right.
energy, and
That's right.
that gives you the literal oxygen to sort of undertake
Exactly.
the journey.
This is the fuel that you need to keep on going, because as we're going through the day, I think this is a common practice around the world. We breathe. And if you're not if you're not breathing, you're not here. Right. But if you want to use this one moment to really energize so you can do this release. And I think for people that do this kind of psychic work or inner work, it takes a lot of calories. You know, you find yourself burning a lot of energy. Um, Breath work, regardless of what discipline, part of that is, of course, restoring balance, internal balance, as well as that energy. So you can use it any time, but the 7 rounds, we start as we climb the mountain, do the cleansing, and as we return to the world of beingness, being present, being around, and being alive, you want to restore that balance so you can continue on the rest of the journey. So yes, it's part of the process itself, but it is a tool that we can use at any time when we feel a little undercharged. Yeah.
Hmm. I love that. Let's circle back to the sort of the deeper the philosophy of aloha, and I know there's like other dimensions of that, almost like pillars of supporting aloha. Like, can you talk a little bit about how, some other concepts and practices that support the practice of aloha?
Yeah. I mean, on a very simple daily level, the mana that I have, I can share with others. So when I see someone who is in need, without imposing myself upon them, but making myself available to share that manna, whether it's a meal, a place to sit, an umbrella to cover from the shade, those are acts of aloha because we're allowing and helping that individual to find centeredness, whatever that may be. And so it's extending myself, not just to that person, but to the cosmos, to the universe, to say, I'm available. And that this gift of life energy that I have, I wish now to share with someone who appears to require or need it. And if they're not actually physically asking for it, I need help. To do so with aloha rather than with pity, right? To do so with aloha rather than obligation. It is giving without expectation of return, knowing that as you extend, you create a vacuum within you that begins to draw upon that as well. So this is about giving without any expectation in return and always receiving and never forgetting to give back. When you do that with that intention, things really begin to stay in what we call equilibrium.
Hmm.
Not equal, but equilibrium. Just like the tide that licks our shores. They come in and they go out. Sometimes they're big, sometimes they're small, but it's all equilibrium. It's a maintaining of a balance. And aloha is that. It's really about balance. How do I participate in that balance? And if I find myself being the creator or the cause of imbalance, it is my aloha that is going to say, I will now practice ho'oponopono with aloha.
Uh-huh.
Restore that balance.
Because you can't be in Pono if you're out of balance, basically. Yeah.
Exactly. And so some of the ingredients you might say to be pono is to be in harmony, to find the balance. And
Hmm.
when there's balance and harmony, then peace emerges. Aloha is the same thing. Aloha isn't just a what can you say, a marketing term for good customer service, right? Right. And hello, sir. How can I help you today? And muttering behind myself, oh, I can't stand it. I want to go home today. There's no aloha in that, right? If there's a genuineness that speaks for itself, we call self-evident rather than self-proclaimed. Just by my beingness, just the idea that I'm acknowledging that you as a spirit being may be experiencing some challenges today, but that doesn't distract or detract from my beingness. My job is, like I say, my joy of being is rooted in aloha. Right.
The J-O-B, joy of being. I love that. Well, Kumu Ramsay, you are just a fountain of deep wisdom, and I love how you're taking all of our kind of surface understandings of some of these concepts and just taking them to a really deep level of spiritual understanding and practice as well. So I
Well,
now
thank
want to spend a little bit of time talking about your upcoming course since we've already been blessed by this time with you, and I
you.
know there's so much more you can share. So we're very grateful that you have partnered with us on a brand new course, and let's talk about it. So the course that Kumu Ramsay is going to teach for Shift and for you, if you choose to move forward, is called the Sacred Path of Aloha. And it's really going to take the kind of principles we've talked about here and deepen into a path of real liberation and healing and blessing for you by really learning from an authentic wisdom keeper. So the description page is at sacredpathofaloha.com, sacredpathofaloha.com. It's a 7-week program. There are no prerequisites. It's really just if your heart calls you. So Kumu Ramsay, I'd love for you to share a little bit about your intentions for what people will come away with from this course with you with.
Sure.
We'll go through
Yeah.
the titles.
It's important to intonate that, right? Their intentions rather than being in tension.
Hmm.
I'm finding that many of us are living in tension these days for numerous reasons. There are a lot of uncertainties that seem to be popping up. And if there's anything that we can be certain of, is change. How do we live in a world of uncertainty? How do we live in a world of change if we're always in tension? So, the intention of the course is to help us and those who are really want to shift that intention of being to not be living in tension all the time, not to be living in reaction mode, but really to be living in a place what I call living for the when rather than the if. The be present in our beingness, to be rather than just become. And aloha happens to be a method, a way of being that represents that beingness of being human rather than human becoming something. And so the intention is that we will help everyone or anyone that participates to begin to calibrate that, to begin to recognize that what I'm seeing in the world may have more to do with my own beliefs, and that I'm imposing upon myself some of this tension, some of this uncertainty. And how do I get to a place of proactive um, response rather than reactive action that is really more conditional? It's a conditioned response rather than an informed choice. And I'm finding that there are many people that I'm working with today are experiencing that external influence, that trigger that causes them to react a certain way. Sometimes it's run, sometimes it's hide, sometimes it's freeze. For others, it may actually be fighting. Aloha then as that spiritual principle of being able to become much more whole, become much more centered. And if I may, Stephen, it draws upon um, some predictions, actually, premonitions of our elders. In my case, Pilahi Pakia Kupuna Loea, who was known for her ability to be present. And it was her mouth to my ears, her mind to my heart, that she said, there would be a time in your life, meaning mine, ours, that we would see a world in dis-ease, disorder, and disconnection. And she was very clear that aloha, the spirit of aloha, and Hawaii would play an important role in restoring that balance, in restoring health, healing, and of course, peace.
Mm.
So my intention, as I would promise to Auntie Pelahi, was that we would continue working on that so that we would never lose aloha and they would become much more connected and in a place of healing and not just a place of fixing.
Mm.
So that's the higher intention, that everyone will leave here able to work on personal healing as we begin to heal the world around us.
Mm. What a beautiful prophetic vision, and gave me chills. Like I feel like it's truth that it can really play a very important part of this larger healing of humanity. So let's go through the modules. Module one, reconnecting with the spiritual language of the land to restore inner harmony.
Yeah, that module really is kind of, I think I demonstrated it some of it today, is acknowledging that the words we use are a reflection of the thoughts we have. And when we align thought, word, and emotion, all of a sudden when we speak, things begin to manifest. Or maybe as I'd say, manifest. The life energy of mind, body, and spirit become one in front of us. And so if we don't understand, or as we gain the greater understanding of how and what we're utilizing as a technology, this is a language as a spiritual technology. And so I will share with, and we will learn to connect to those elementals every time we speak, knowing that the seeds of thought are watered by the emotions of heart.
Mm.
And as I speak and as I act, I begin to manifest those thoughts and those feelings. And so if we don't like what we see in front of us, we should ask ourselves, what did I just manifest?
Mm.
And so it'll be important for us to examine that. And not just from the Hawaiian or Kanaka Maoli, the Hawaiian principles, but to ask people from their own heritage, from their own cultures, what about those languages could they bring forth that have similar characteristics? And I think we're all indigenous to some place, and that place is Earth,
Mm.
island Earth. And I think the language of Earth, the Earth language, is one that many are trying to recover and restore.
Mm. Module two, healing the mother wound through Ho'oponopono.
Yeah, that's understanding that our first mother, the one that we came through, right? Many of us have become disconnected for whatever reason, physical, mental, emotional. But on the larger level, we've been disconnected from what many of us refer to as Mother Earth. Why is that important? Because it suggests if we subscribe to the notion that we are what we eat, what are we eating? What is our nutrition mentally, physically, and spiritually coming from? Is it coming from the earth? Is it coming from the air? Is it coming from our mother? Or is it coming from an artificial source, a box, a can, or AI, right? The natural and spiritual intelligence of relationship with mother. Um, we might actually suggest that some of us are experiencing daddy issues today. We're relying on a different mindset, maybe because we have a disconnection with mother, mommy issues. So as we restore our relationship to mother, the source of where we came from, then perhaps we can better navigate the world that we're in today that may be driven by those who themselves need a little mommy time.
Very charitably put. Module 3, releasing victimhood to awaken the warrior within and cultivate your personal power.
Yes, we'll look at what we call the warrior spirit. You know, you have the warrior, then you have the spirit of the warrior, you have the businessman and the business spirit. This will begin to look at us and say, how do I stand up? Not necessarily to fight, but to protect. In our traditions, the idea of a warrior is one that protects, which sometimes requires fighting rather than just being a soldier who is always ready to fight things. There's a tendency to do that. And sometimes that comes from a place of fear, anxiety, a need because I don't have enough, whatever that might be. But a warrior posture, a warrior spirit begins to acknowledge that I'm really here to protect myself, my loved ones, my place, and these concepts and things that I live for. And as things approach me, rather than defining them as something as an attack, but redefining them as a gift or an opportunity that I can then, through my warriorship, begin to protect and reframe, redefine, and refocus that which coming at me, not as an attack, but as a gift. And in doing so, protect myself and others around me. So this goes back to some cultural stories, which I'll share, and principles about how we became who we are. Bless you. From the spirit of warrior priest. So this is an inside job.
Module 4, walking the path of the priest to heal addiction and reclaim alignment.
And so as I prepared to say that, the priest within us is that when life becomes a walking prayer, many of us stop for a moment when we're in need to extend a prayer, an invocation. And then we've added the other part of that, the listening part called meditation. Well, in the priest spirit, anytime I see something that may be disruptive, right, fearful or angry, rather than becoming that soldier I just talked about to fight it, that the tool, the gift that we have is prayer. How do we apply that prayer in the times that seem most difficult when we want to put up our hands, but actually start with prayer? So to live in the heart and the mind and the spirit of a priest who is dedicated to the spiritual is where we want to be. Not to say that we aren't living in a physical space, but as spiritual beings in a physical space, how do I then draw upon that technology, that practice? So these two modules together begin to put together the warrior priest existence that each of us has.
Love it. Module 5, embodying the way of Aloha as a living legacy of love, lineage, and service.
Yes, it's being able to recognize that what I see in front of me is a mirror of me. I don't see me. I don't know who I am until I actually spend time with you because you are the mirror. So if I'm not living in aloha, then the things I'm seeing outside of me are absent of that. And rather than trying to fill that outside of me, begin to restore that which comes from within me, the spirit of aloha that then becomes the true object of reflection. And to live, be, and extend aloha then becomes the way of being. This, for me, begins to fulfill that very prophecy from Pulahi Paki, who was saying, the world will be healed with aloha. Not the mechanics of aloha, but the living and being of aloha. And so in this module, we'll be looking at that. How do I embody that? What are the things that I can do to be that aloha and not just talk about it?
Beautiful. Module 6, forgiving the ancestors to bring healing to your lineage.
As we spoke earlier, it's knowing that I'm standing in a stream of knowledge, information coming towards me. And anything before me, not just those physical ancestors that I'm connected to by DNA, but really anyone before me that has contributed to who I am today. And As I begin to see these as gifts, again, like I said earlier, we can then begin to ask for forgiveness, forgive them for doing what they thought was best that may no longer serve me, that these beliefs, these concepts and principles that are barriers and obstacles to my moving forward, as well as to the benefit of my descendants, that I'll have the ability to begin to remove those barriers and obstacles and replace them with opportunities and a new way of seeing. Essentially, we may have heard it before. My past doesn't have to define my future. My ancestors don't necessarily define my future either. Um, because I have the opportunity to be grateful, to be thankful, to release and let go, and to choose a different path.
And finally, Module 7, strengthening your sacred path through the power of mana.
The life-giving energy that really doesn't stop where we are, but it has its own path for us to ride that mana and not just to drive the mana. I mentioned the path before us. It's not just a path. It's just not something we're following like a trail, but it's the way. It's a way of being. So my way, my path, my beingness, taken from the previous modules of learning to be in aloha, to be living a prayer, to be in warriorship to protect, and so that I can unify one mind, body, and spirit to be whole. This will be the intention. So that when I'm on my path, regardless of what direction I choose, that I can be present for myself, for others, and to live into a prayer that we say to be in the right place at the right time for my good and the good of others.
Well, what an incredible offering this is. There's so much deep spiritual wisdom in this and practical implications for how we live our lives. So what a beautiful offering from your heart to the Shift community. So I'll share a few more things about it. So again, it's all at sacredpathofaloha.com. If you choose to move forward, you'll get the 7 90-minute live sessions with Kumu Ramsay, which you'll also get recordings of, both video and audio, as well as word-for-word transcripts. There's weekly exercises and practices for home. There's a Facebook community to support you and deepen your sense of community. There's also small group time to connect with other participants. And on the page Sacred Way of Aloha, you also see a number of extra bonuses that enhance the whole journey for you. There's a video teaching from Kumu Ramsay called Hey Hawaii Au, Grandmother's Coming Home. You want to share anything about that bonus?
Sure. When we asked a person in the past who they were, it wasn't our name. It was Hey Hawaii. Hey Hawaii is I am Hawaii. I am this place.
Mm.
We are our places and our ancestors. And so in this particular sharing, it will explain some of that. It will give you an idea that how we've moved through time. Grandmother coming home is just a reference to the idea that the ocean is rising, in our case, right? Sea level rise. That's grandmother. But hopefully it's a metaphor for all of us to recognize that at some point in time, we're all part of a larger thing called mother, right? That this earth culture, and I think it's calling to many of us. Many of us are beginning to hear and want to do this reconciliation to get back to that original indigenous being of who we are. And I mean indigenous to island earth.
I love that. The second bonus is called Me, Myself, and I, Centering Yourself Through Ho'oponopono. This is a guided video practice with Kumu Ramsay. You want to share a little bit about that?
Yes, it actually begins to introduce and pull through the principles and the practice, the mechanics, if you will, of Ho'oponopono, but also layering in the deep meaning. Oftentimes, programs will focus on mechanics. We begin to ask ourselves how rather than the deeper why. And so, in this particular series or this offering, we'll be talking about the meaning that is tied to the mechanics, how we begin to connect those different parts. What are they called? Who are they? The inner family that I've suggested is part of our inner alignment. And then taking that to the actual practice of doing the Ho'oponopono.
Mm. Beautiful bonus as well. And then there's one more bonus you get. It's a special bonus if you sign up on today, by midnight Pacific time. This is a video dialogue with Kumu Ramsay and Cindy Dale, who's one of our lead energy healing faculty, who's a fantastic soul as well. I just love Cindy. So this is called From Wound to Wisdom, Releasing the Past to Remember Who You Are. Want to share anything about that special dialogue? Folks get
Yeah,
to.
it was a special time that Cindy and I shared, which really begins to explore those things that we translate and have identified as wounds. Um, but how do I begin to heal that wound and move to a place of wisdom, which is to be more present, to be more functional, and not to be living in victim state all the time, or always focusing on what the pain is, but translating that pain into something much more positive, something that begin to move us forward. And
Mm.
again, looking at ancestral trauma as source of our current trauma, as a way to release it so that my descendants and others don't have to carry that burden anymore. So
Wow.
it was a wonderful conversation.
What a beautiful, beautiful extra bonus if you sign up today to get that beautiful dialogue from Wound to Wisdom with Kumu Ramsay and Cindy. So this is clearly going to be an amazing program. I've just been so blessed already with the wisdom and depth and power in what you've been sharing, Kumu Ramsay. So we've kept the investment for this very accessible. It's just 3 payments of $128. You can save 10% when you pay in full with one payment of $349. The
Wow.
course is going to start September 4th and run Thursdays at 5 Pacific, 8 Eastern. But even if you can't make the live times, you can still get the full value of the recordings, the transcripts, and the community as well. On the page, you'll see many testimonials about working with Kumu Ramsay, and you're just really in good hands. And you can just feel the authentic stream of breath from his ancestors through him to us that is touching our souls. And I can say I feel it myself, and I'm sure you do as well. So if you want to move forward, you are welcome. Again, it's all at sacredpathofaloha.com, and you get that special bonus with Kumu Ramsay and Cindy Dale when you sign up by midnight tonight. So, Kumu Ramsay, what a beautiful hour. You're a really blessing to be with. So thank
Well,
you for
thank you, Stephen.
that.
I don't go where I'm not invited, so thank you for inviting me so that we could share this time together.
Yeah. Anything that's still on your heart you want to share with folks who are considering doing your course with you?
Just to be able to say that we're all loved, and at some point in time, when we can love ourselves, others can love us too. And hopefully, in the time that we share together, this principle of aloha, which is also about deep love, that we'll be able to release these things that perhaps are the barriers and obstacles to us experiencing that inside and out. And so, with the aloha from my ancestors to yours, I look forward to us spending some time together to experience,
Hmm.
share, and be aloha.
Is there anything you want to offer as a prayer to close since you opened with an invocation?
Sure, we could say that. And this is just to offer a prayer of peace, which is, of course, balance and harmony, and always with aloha. Yeah, so, o ka maluhia no me o e ku maluhia a pauloa. Ka maluhia o ka I o au no ka maluhia. Ka maluhia no na wa a pau no ki a mau maulo aku. Pāwi aku au I ku maluhia ia oe. Waiho aku au I ku maluhia me oe. A ole a ka maluhia wale no. Ka maluhia. Oka E, which basically says, peace be with you, all my peace.
Hmm.
The peace that is I, the peace that is I am, the peace that is always, now, and forever. May the peace be with you, not my peace, but the peace of I, divinity.
Hmm.
Peace be with you. Aloha, aloha, aloha.
Thank you. Aloha, aloha, aloha. Beautiful.
Until we see you again.